To answer straight away, yes, a big one. This is very obvious if you just look at their behavior, since, especially with the US, the only representation they care about is the money, not the image. If IndyCar and WEC are billionaires, then F1 is Lex Luthor. What I mean by this is, fundamentally, F1 is no different to other motorsports since there are cars and drivers and competition. However, they put themselves above still due to some superiority complex that has only gotten worse with each era of F1, since with each era means more money to make over everyone else. For a while, this superiority was deserved, since F1 was a house for hard and fair racing as well as entertainment. However, now, it is falling behind on the actual entertainment of the races on a weekend by weekend basis, that you can now argue that F1 is not even the pinnacle of motorsport anymore, and I will delve into this later. This is less of an analysis video, so don't expect me to talk about the root of the problem. This is more of an opinionated video, so expect me to talk about F1 losing every ounce of credibility it once had if their pride and greed continues to get the better of them. So, let us discuss the elitism problem in F1 and why if nothing changes, F1 will become more of a joke than it already currently is. So, like I said, there is an elitism problem with F1. So, why? Where did this come from? Well, it's simpler than you may think. It's what makes anyone develop elitism. Money. The more money you are earning and receiving, the more pride you will develop, and this is natural obviously. However, what isn't natural is just how high the bar has become. Now admittedly, there is an argument to say it is warranted, since F1 is more of an engineering competition compared to other motorsports, which is very, very pricey, since the cars are the fastest in the world. However, the bar that has been set by F1 is now the highest it has ever been. The amount of money needed to enter F1 is a staggering 200 million, and that comes without hiring people, building facilities, building the car, traveling, and so much more. Now, even if a team has the money, they still have to go through the hardest part of the process, and I kid you not, it's literally if FOM likes you. Now obviously I am exaggerating, however not really, since let's take Andretti Cadillac for example. Michael Andretti, being the GOAT that he is, said he has the money, he has the car, he has the people, he has the factory to FOM. However, they still denied him because FOM said they wouldn't bring much value to the sport. This is a massive slap in the face to not only Michael, but Mario Andretti, since Mario is literally an F1 champion, and the Andretti team has had success in other motorsports, such as in IndyCar and Formula E. They are not incompetent, they are quite literally one of the most competent teams that can enter the sport. But like I said, F1 basically denied them because they don't like them, stating how they wouldn't be competitive, which I find to be very unlikely. I'm not going to super delve into the Andretti stuff since there are thousands of videos and articles about it, but their denial shows elitism, since I'm willing to bet if they were to offer more money to FOM, they would accept them in a heartbeat. Now, one might say F1 has never been about entertainment. Since its inauguration, it was always about prestige and being the pinnacle. And while yes, they are right, that does not give F1 the right to completely disregard the fans, and this will inevitably lead to a breaking point where fans will start boycotting and stop watching the sports, especially in the United States. And what doesn't help are other motorsports providing better action as well as keeping the prestige to it, but we will discuss this later in the video. For now, let us move on and play devil's advocate a little bit and see if maybe the elitism is not a problem, but rather a pillar of F1. Like I said, elitism could be a pillar of F1, and I honestly agree with that, and it is not inherently a bad thing. In fact, it could be quite the opposite. By having the notion of prestige, the rewards are much more sweeter and more exciting to see the winner of. Prestige can benefit the sport as we saw in 2021. The very notion of how prestigious F1 was enhanced the title even more. Let's take IndyCar for example, since there are title fights right to the end almost every single year, but yet Indy doesn't produce nearly enough attention despite the entertainment, and that's because the lack of a notion of prestige, since all of its prestige is in the 500, not the championship. So this makes the 500 the only real thing of value to most people in the series, and it isn't held by it also being a spec series. So, with the lack of engineering and championship value, the entertainment is to what be expected from them, not the elite competition, which isn't a bad thing, far from it, but prestige is what is expected from F1, and that's why great races and challenges for the title are unrivaled by any other series, since it's akin to two top gladiators dueling in an arena for glory and class, compared to IndyCar, where the entertainment is expected from them with no major prestige besides the 500, so it feels like watching a street fight. Both lead to the same result of a winner, but by having the notion of prestige and value across an entire season, one is clearly more valued by most drivers. Plus, like I said, F1 is more of an engineering competition. There are hundreds of engineers building the fastest car to win it all, and of course, to be the fastest, you have to be the best, which creates superiority and elitism. So, all in all, F1's elitism can be a good thing, but going back to reality, this elitism is starting to backfire since theoretically, more competition means better action, which means more eyes and more money. But since F1 is the closest it's been in a while, I personally believe that they believe the best is already present and there are no improvements to be made, but there are always improvements that can be made, especially when teams like VCAR, Haas, and Williams constantly get into situations that could have been avoided had more professionalism and competency been more present. Too much elitism will be the downfall of F1, and the end may be near since other prestigious motorsports are producing more entertaining races while keeping the prestige. The biggest example of this is of course WEC, and WEC had a problem. No one wanted to join, and that was because the requirements and costs were too much. So to counteract this, they not only lowered the bar, but made many rule changes that prioritize entertainment while keeping the cars different from one another to prevent spec series characteristics. And say what you want about the BOP rules, but you have to admit that it's paying off, since there is such an influx of teams now, such as Ferrari, Lamborghini, Porsche, Toyota, Peugeot, BMW, and many independent teams in just the hypercar category, and the racing has been exquisite. Plus, add on the talented drivers such as Mick Schumacher, Nick De Vries, Valentino Rossi, Jensen Button, Robert Kubica, Kamui Kobayashi, Brendan Hartley, Sebastian Buemi, and many more, and you get a prestigious, entertaining racing series with a load of competition. And the crazy part is, F1 is like 90% close to achieving this, since they have the talent and the prestige, they just need that extra bit of competition, and Andretti, in my opinion, would bring that. F1 has introduced changes that bring more competition, such as the cost cap, which has significantly brought their field closer, but more teams will bring even more competition and more money and make F1 more enjoyable for everyone. But obviously, many other changes should be made to make F1 a bit more closer, but the point is, F1 is on the verge of greatness, but their pride and greed is preventing them from more competition, and keeping out teams is only going to lower the reputation of F1 by the country they desire so much more money from. F1 simply needs to open up to the idea of true American representation through Andretti, since one American driver who is inconsistent is not going to cut it, and 3 races in the States is only going to cause disgust with F1 due to the nightmare they create leading up to those weekends. And by avoiding doing these things and instead opting for true American representation, F1 will see that they will earn more money and eyes while keeping the elitism and prestige that make the sport great in the first place. And there is what I think of the elitism problem in F1. Obviously, I did not mention everything, but I feel like what I did mention was the biggest issue with F1 recently, and that is the elitism keeping out Andretti and potentially even more competition away from the sport. It is really unfortunate that F1 is like this, since if they didn't have such a superiority complex, there could be so many more teams in this sport, and drivers too, since many talented drivers that should be in F1 were denied entry because there is no space for them. An ideal F1 to me is one where there is so much competition and rules preventing one alpha team from being so dominant in everything, while also keeping the differences between the teams big enough so as to avoid it becoming closer to a spec series. And this is obviously similar to how current WEC is right now, and if F1 can follow some of these footsteps by WEC, they will see such a rise in ratings, even more than the ones in 2021. Anyways, if you enjoyed today's video, consider leaving a like and subscribing since it helps me out in delivering better content, and let me know in the comments what you think of the elitism in F1, and as always, have an amazing day.
Good weather for the duck.